Before the world awakens, there is a sacred silence that belongs only to those who seek mastery. It is the stillness before the first thought, before the first noise, before the weight of the day begins to press upon the mind. The Stoics saw this moment, the awakening, not as routine, but as a ritual. Marcus Aurelius wrote that each morning, the soul must rise to meet the light as a soldier rises to duty, not in complaint, but in quiet strength. It is here, at the threshold between sleep and awareness, that we decide who commands whom, the mind or the impulses that wish to enslave it. Modern neuroscience confirms what the ancients intuited. In these early moments, the brain recalibrates its chemistry. Dopamine levels rise, cortisol peaks, and neuroplasticity opens a brief window of renewal. What you do now imprints not only your day, but your identity. To the Stoics, the morning was a return to reason, the reawakening of virtue, purpose, and the discipline that makes freedom possible. To science, it is a neurological reset, the alignment of biology with intention. And so, the dawn becomes more than a change of light. It becomes a test of sovereignty. Will you begin the day by chasing distractions, or will you begin by mastering yourself? Transformation does not start in grand decisions. It begins in the unseen, in the small, deliberate acts that build the architecture of strength. Through 10 habits drawn from the wisdom of the ancients and the discoveries of the modern mind, you will learn to wake not just your body, but your purpose. Let us begin at the threshold of the day, where the first decision defines all others. The moment of stillness. Awaken before the world does. Before the world speaks, silence must. The moment you open your eyes, you stand at the border between chaos and control, between the reactive life and the deliberate one. Most people cross that threshold unconsciously. They reach for the noise before they reach for themselves. The Stoic does not. The Stoic rises before the world because he understands that the morning is not merely time. It is territory. Whoever owns the morning owns the mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote that rising early is an act of self-respect, an affirmation that the mind commands the body, not the other way around. To delay the day is to surrender your throne before the battle begins. To rise early, calmly, and intentionally is to remind yourself that discipline is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the first victory of the day, quiet yet absolute. In the language of neuroscience, this habit reshapes your inner chemistry. When you wake early, the body releases cortisol at its natural peak, synchronizing with the circadian rhythm that governs focus and alertness. The light that enters your eyes signals your brain to reset its internal clock, releasing dopamine that fuels motivation and serotonin that steadies mood. The world outside still sleeps, but within you, the machinery of excellence begins to turn. This is not about productivity. It is about sovereignty. The calm awareness that your actions, not impulses, set the tone for the day. The Stoics did not speak of motivation. They spoke of alignment. They believed that to live well was to live according to nature, not indulgence, but order. To rise early is to live in harmony with the rhythm of creation itself. The dawn becomes a mirror of virtue, quiet, steady, inevitable. While others run after meaning, the Stoic greets it as an old friend, found again in the soft light of morning. But to wake early is not merely to open your eyes before others. It is to awaken your awareness before distraction takes hold. It is to reclaim the sacred seconds between sleep and speech, to meet yourself before the world does. In those first minutes, your thoughts are raw, unshaped by influence, uncorrupted by noise. Here you decide whether you will be driven by reaction or by reason. Science calls it attentional priming, the act of setting cognitive patterns that will echo through every decision that follows. If you begin your day by checking your phone, your mind becomes addicted to external stimuli. If you begin with silence, reflection, and breath, you train your nervous system to obey your command. What you repeat, you reinforce. What you reinforce, you become. Epictetus reminded his students that freedom is found not in the absence of restraint, but in the mastery of choice. To rise early is to choose clarity over confusion, peace over panic, discipline over delay. It is to rise not for the approval of others, but for the quiet pride that only the self-disciplined know. The pride of beginning the day as the author of your own story. So when the alarm rings and the warmth of the bed whispers comfort, remember that every act of surrender writes a sentence in your fate. Every act of courage writes a new chapter. The Stoic chooses the cold floor, the breath of dawn, the solitude that sharpens the mind. For it is here, before the world awakes, that he finds what the world will spend all day searching for: peace, focus, and the unshakable strength of knowing who commands his soul. From stillness, clarity is born. And from clarity, movement. The breath of presence, reset the nervous system. The breath is the bridge between the mind and the body, the invisible thread that connects thought to physiology, spirit to flesh. Most people move through their mornings unaware of this rhythm, breathing shallowly, unconsciously, trapped in the restless patterns of yesterday's emotions. But the Stoic, like the neuroscientist, understands that the way we breathe shapes the way we live. To master the breath is to master the nervous system. And to master the nervous system is to master the self. Cleanthes compared the soul to a flame disturbed by the wind, flickering, uncertain, losing its form to every gust of emotion. The breath, he said, restores its shape. It is the calm exhalation that steadies the inner fire. Today, science describes the same truth in the language of biology. Slow, deliberate breathing lowers cortisol, calms the amygdala, and reactivates the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason. Andrew Huberman's research shows that the body's fastest route to calm is not through the mind, but through the breath. You cannot think your way out of anxiety, but you can breathe your way through it. Each morning, take 5 conscious breaths before speaking, before moving, before surrendering to routine. Inhale deeply through the nose, a breath that fills the diaphragm and signals safety to the nervous system. Then exhale longer than you inhaled, through the mouth gently. This extended exhalation activates the parasympathetic branch of your autonomic system, the biological foundation of composure. It is not mere relaxation. It is self-regulation, the act of reclaiming command over the only kingdom you can truly govern, your state of being. Epictetus taught that we suffer not from what happens, but from our interpretation of it. Breath is how you interrupt that interpretation before it spirals into fear. When the morning air enters your lungs, it carries more than oxygen. It carries the opportunity to reset, to begin again, to rewrite the signals that yesterday's stress carved into your body. Joe Dispenza calls this neurochemical renewal, the act of sending a new emotional message to your cells, breaking the loop of unconscious reaction. Imagine your breath as the sculptor of consciousness. Each inhale expands awareness. Each exhale releases what no longer serves you. The Stoics called this prohairesis, the power of choice applied to perception. Breath, then, becomes a daily practice of prohairesis in motion. Every time you slow down your breathing, you are reminding your biology that you are not the slave of circumstance, but the architect of response. Jordan Peterson often says that order begins within. And this order is not mental alone, it is rhythmic, physiological. A disciplined breath is the foundation upon which the mind can stand firm. Daniel Goleman's research on emotional intelligence confirms that awareness of breath precedes awareness of emotion, and emotional awareness precedes mastery of behavior. You cannot command what you do not first observe. In the morning, as you breathe, the mind begins to settle into alignment. Thoughts lose their sharpness, emotions soften, awareness deepens. It is as if the noise of the world withdraws for a moment, and the ancient clarity of being returns. This is presence, not the absence of thought, but the quiet observation of it. It is the moment where the body obeys, the heart slows, and the soul remembers that peace is not given, it is practiced. Through each breath, you become less reactive and more reflective. You start to feel the subtle distinction between stimulus and choice, between impulse and intention. You realize that the breath is not something you perform, it is something you participate in, a dance with existence itself. When the breath is steady, the mind becomes still enough to see truth. The cold encounter, train discomfort like a warrior. There is a moment when the cold first touches your skin, sharp, honest, uninviting. The body recoils, the breath shortens, and every instinct demands retreat. Yet in that exact instant lies the purest form of training the Stoics ever taught. To meet discomfort without resistance, to look fear in the eye and remain still. The cold, whether found in water, wind, or silence, is not your enemy. It is your mirror. It shows you the places within that still believe comfort equals safety. Epictetus reminded his students that we should not wish for things to be easier, but to become stronger. The cold teaches that lesson without words. When you expose yourself to it willingly, not as punishment but as practice, you awaken something ancient, the discipline that once kept humanity alive before convenience made us soft. Modern science calls it hormesis, the adaptive response that strengthens the body through controlled stress. Cold exposure activates the vagus nerve, improves dopamine regulation, and resets your stress threshold. It teaches your nervous system that adversity does not mean danger. It means growth. When you step into cold water at dawn, every nerve screams rebellion. The body trembles, the mind protests. But if you stay, even for a moment, a strange alchemy occurs. The panic gives way to presence. The breath deepens. The heart, once racing, finds rhythm again. What was once unbearable becomes bearable, and then something more, empowering. That shift is not physical alone. It is philosophical. You have crossed the invisible line between instinct and will. Marcus Aurelius faced his mornings not in comfort but in confrontation. He wrote that we must rise to meet what we dislike, for it is there that we learn the truth of our strength. The modern mind avoids struggle at every turn, mistaking pleasure for peace, but pleasure makes the mind weak. Discomfort, embraced consciously, makes it resilient. Neuroscience confirms that when the brain endures short periods of cold, it releases norepinephrine, sharpening focus and elevating mood. The same molecule that once signaled survival now becomes the messenger of clarity. Cold water meditation is not about the water. It is about the moment when instinct says stop and discipline says stay. It is a training ground for every conflict you will face throughout the day. Each second you remain, you teach the mind that fear can be observed, not obeyed. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the rehearsal of hardship. By choosing controlled difficulty, you reduce the terror of unexpected pain. You walk into the world armored in composure. Joe Dispenza speaks of rewiring the body's emotional memory, breaking the chain of habitual reactions. The cold does this with brutal simplicity. It shocks you into the present, cutting through the fog of thought. It forces the mind and body into alignment. You can feel the biology of resilience forming in real time. Mitochondria multiplying, dopamine surging, awareness sharpening. Science calls it adaptation. The Stoics called it virtue. The practice need not be extreme. A cold shower, an early walk against the wind, a refusal to yield to comfort's first invitation. What matters is the principle, to confront what is difficult before it confronts you. The warrior trains not for war but for peace, for the calm that only earned confidence provides. When you face the cold each morning, you do not conquer the temperature. You conquer hesitation. You prove, once again, that you are not ruled by instinct but guided by intention. In that shiver, in that breath that wants to escape you, you will discover the unshakable core the ancients called ataraxia, the untroubled soul. Having faced the cold, the day's warmth will feel earned. The journal of the mind, right before the noise, writes you. When the morning light reaches your desk and the world still hums in quiet, there lies an ancient discipline that modern chaos has nearly forgotten, the art of reflection through writing. To the Stoics, journaling was not self-expression. It was self-examination. It was the dialogue between reason and emotion before the world intruded with its noise. Seneca began each day by writing what virtue demanded of him, and ended it by questioning where he had fallen short. Between these lines, he built his peace. The Stoic journal is not a diary of events, but a mirror of the soul. It is where the unseen is made visible, where confusion becomes clarity, and where emotion, once shapeless, takes the form of understanding. To write before the noise writes you is to claim authorship of your own mind. It is to decide, with ink and intention, what kind of person you will be before the day decides it for you. Neuroscience explains what the ancients practiced intuitively. Writing strengthens neural circuits associated with self-awareness and emotional regulation. It activates the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for focus, restraint, and decision-making. This process, known in cognitive behavioral therapy as cognitive restructuring, transforms emotion into insight. You are literally rewiring the brain, translating chaos into coherence. When you name a thought, you weaken its power. When you question it, you reclaim authority over it. Marcus Aurelius's meditations were not written for the world. They were reminders to himself, silent conversations between the man he was and the man he aspired to be. In that private ritual, he sharpened his perception and anchored his values. He wrote not because he was lost, but because he refused to be. The page, to him, was the battlefield of the invisible, where irrational impulses met the sword of reason. Joe Dispenza would call this the reprogramming of the mind through awareness. Each written reflection breaks a neural pattern of reactivity and replaces it with conscious design. It is neuroplasticity in motion, the science of becoming. When you write, you engage both hemispheres of the brain, the creative right and the analytical left. Together, they integrate thought and feeling, logic and intuition. What results is not just understanding, it is unity. Begin your day with this unity. Ask yourself quietly, what will I face today? What virtues must I carry into it? What emotions must I master before they master me? Then write, not to sound wise, but to become honest. The page has no audience, no judgment. It asks only for truth. When your thoughts appear before you, raw and unguarded, they lose their ability to hide. Fear becomes smaller, anger becomes understandable, and purpose becomes visible again. In those few minutes of solitude, you become both author and reader of your inner life. The pen becomes your compass. The words become your map. And the act itself, steady, reflective, unhurried, becomes meditation. Huberman might say you are lowering your cognitive load, clearing the brain's working memory for creativity and focus. But the Stoic would say something simpler. You are making peace with yourself before confronting the world. Write what you will face. Write what you will resist. Write what you will become. Let the page carry the burden that thought alone cannot hold. Every line you trace becomes a thread of discipline woven into the fabric of your character. When the world begins to speak, you will already have spoken to yourself. The noise will meet a mind already shaped by clarity. You will move through the day as one who has already decided who he is and who he will not become. Having spoken with yourself, you are ready to face the world. The posture of the soul. Stand like a philosopher. There is a posture of the body, and there is a posture of the soul. The first is seen, the second is felt. Yet the two are mirrors of each other. When you rise in the morning, before a single word has been spoken, your body tells the mind what kind of day it will be. Slouched shoulders, a lowered head, shallow breath, all whisper defeat before the world even has the chance to resist you. But when you stand with intention, with the spine aligned, shoulders open, and breath grounded, something invisible shifts. The Stoics understood this not as vanity, but as virtue made visible. Marcus Aurelius believed that the body must reflect the dignity of the mind. How could one seek inner order while the body remains a vessel of collapse? Every movement, every stance must express your philosophy. To stand upright is to declare silently, I am not at the mercy of what happens. I am aligned with what I choose to be. Modern science echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies on posture reveal that the way we carry ourselves alters the chemistry within us. Standing tall increases serotonin, the neurotransmitter of stability, and balances cortisol, the hormone of stress. It strengthens what Andrew Huberman calls the mind-body feedback loop. The physical shape of confidence creates the emotional state of confidence. To stand like a philosopher is not an act of pride. It is an act of presence. You are telling your nervous system, I am safe, I am capable, I am ready. Your brain listens to your body as much as your body listens to your brain. When you hold yourself upright, you prime the prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision-making, to function with clarity and control. The Stoics did not speak in terms of neurotransmitters, but they knew that virtue must be embodied. A slouched body cannot carry a disciplined soul. Epictetus, who walked with a limp, never used his condition as an excuse for weakness. He carried himself with a quiet majesty that transcended pain. He taught that dignity does not depend on perfection, but on presence, the refusal to let suffering dictate how you move through the world. The posture of the philosopher, then, is not about how you look, but about what you remember. It is the reminder that your body is the temple through which your thoughts are practiced. The body obeys the mind that leads it. The mind follows the body that honors it. Each morning, take a moment to align your form with your purpose. Feel your feet grounded, as if drawing strength from the earth itself. Straighten your spine, as if pulled upward by the weightless thread of reason. Lift your gaze to the horizon, not to anticipate what will come, but to meet it with calm authority. In that stance, you are no longer reacting to the world. You are shaping it. Joe Dispenza would call this alignment a physiological signal to the quantum field, an energetic posture that tells reality who you are before it tells you what to be. But whether through science or philosophy, the principle remains: posture is state. Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence shows that presence begins not with words, but with awareness. To command presence, you must first inhabit your own body fully. The morning posture, repeated daily, becomes ritual. The nervous system learns the language of composure. The muscles remember the stillness of discipline. The mind, no longer scattered, returns to its axis. Over time, this alignment builds an invisible armor, not to resist life, but to face it with grace. So when the world pushes, you will not collapse. When uncertainty rises, you will not bow. You will stand like a philosopher, upright in form, unbroken in spirit, immovable in principle. Because when the body stands in virtue, the mind no longer bends to fear. The gratitude recalibration, anchor in what cannot be taken. Each morning, when the light spills quietly across the room, gratitude becomes the philosopher's first act of resistance. In a world ruled by desire where attention is currency and comparison is poison, to feel gratitude is to rebel. Zeno of Citium lost everything in a shipwreck: his wealth, his status, his plans. Yet from that loss, he built an empire of thought that still shapes minds 2 millennia later. When asked how he endured, he said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." Gratitude, for the Stoic, is not the denial of pain. It is the recognition that even in loss, something indestructible remains. Modern science agrees. The brain is a prediction machine, always seeking what's missing. Gratitude interrupts this cycle. It shifts the focus from lack to sufficiency, rewiring neural pathways to perceive stability where the anxious mind sees only threat. Studies show that gratitude raises baseline dopamine and serotonin levels, the same neurochemicals linked to motivation and well-being. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain cannot hold 2 dominant emotional states simultaneously. Gratitude and fear are incompatible. When you practice one, you silence the other. In Stoicism, this practice is not sentimental, it is strategic. Gratitude trains perception, the Stoic's greatest weapon. Seneca wrote that no man is poor who has enough, and he who has enough is rich. To name the blessings you already possess is to remind yourself that fortune can take nothing essential from you. Health, wealth, relationships, these may come and go, but the power to interpret, to choose, to respond with virtue, that remains unassailable. Gratitude anchors the mind in what cannot be taken. Begin your morning with this remembrance. Before touching your phone, before checking the weight of your problems, close your eyes and name 3 things that make existence enough. The warmth of sunlight, the steady rhythm of breath, the privilege of awareness itself. As you do, you are not escaping reality. You are reframing it. You are teaching your brain through repetition to notice abundance instead of absence. Joe Dispenza calls this raising your emotional baseline, programming the body to feel fulfilled before external conditions justify it. In this way, gratitude ceases to be a reaction. It becomes identity. Marcus Aurelius often wrote of loss, of children, friends, health, empire, yet never of despair. He trained his heart to accept transience without bitterness. He reminded himself daily that everything borrowed from fate must one day be returned. To love life, therefore, is to love impermanence. Gratitude is the art of seeing perfection inside imperfection, order inside uncertainty. It is not the blind optimism of comfort, but the courageous acceptance of reality. When you give thanks each morning, you align your nervous system with virtue. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for empathy and long-term thinking, becomes more active. Cortisol, the hormone of threat, subsides. You feel lighter, yet more grounded. Strong enough to face the weight of life without resentment. Gratitude sharpens presence. It turns ordinary moments into sacred ones. It transforms a morning routine into a meditation on meaning. Epictetus taught that happiness depends not on getting what we want, but on wanting what we already have. This is not resignation. It is liberation. The grateful mind is untouchable because it no longer bargains with circumstance. It moves through the world as a traveler, not an owner, knowing that everything can be lost except the capacity to love what remains. Anchor yourself there, in what cannot be taken. Gratitude does not make life easier. It makes you unbreakable. From gratitude, the mind draws the strength to face loss without despair. The mental rehearsal. Anticipate. Don't anxiate. Every morning, the mind wakes before the body fully understands it is alive. In those first minutes, it begins to imagine what is coming. The meeting, the deadline, the uncertainty, the noise. Left unchecked, imagination becomes anxiety. But directed with awareness, it becomes preparation. The Stoics knew this truth centuries before neuroscience named it. The mind rehearses the future whether you guide it or not. The difference between the anxious and the wise is that one rehearses fear and the other rehearses virtue. Epictetus taught, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. Every emotion that overwhelms us starts not in the event, but in the image we create of it. The Stoic trains this faculty by practicing premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of what may go wrong. This is not pessimism, it is inoculation. It is the philosophical version of cognitive behavioral therapy, where you expose the mind to imagined adversity so that when it arrives, you are calm, not crushed. You do not eliminate uncertainty, you neutralize its power to surprise you. Science calls this mental rehearsal. Athletes use it to perform under pressure. Surgeons use it to steady their hands. Leaders use it to remain clear amid chaos. The brain, when vividly visualizing a scenario, activates the same neural circuits as if it were truly happening. You are sculpting the architecture of composure. The prefrontal cortex learns the path of clarity before emotion can interfere. Andrew Huberman explains that such visualization reduces anticipatory anxiety and strengthens the neural connections responsible for focus and resilience. What Marcus Aurelius practiced as Stoic foresight, neuroscience now describes as neural training. In the morning, close your eyes and picture your day. See it not through the lens of worry, but of readiness. Imagine the challenges waiting, the conversation that might test your patience, the temptation that might erode your discipline, the fatigue that will whisper surrender. Watch each unfold. Feel the emotions rise: frustration, fear, resistance. And then, in that mental theater, choose your response. Calm your breath. Hold your posture. Speak with intention. See yourself acting with virtue, not reaction. The body follows what the mind rehearses. Joe Dispenza calls this act installing the future. You are programming new patterns into your subconscious. rehearsing gratitude instead of irritation, courage instead of hesitation. With repetition, the brain adopts these choices as instinct. What was once effort becomes your default state. Over time, the practice transforms anxiety into anticipation, chaos into choreography. Jordan Peterson often speaks of responsibility as the antidote to suffering. Mental rehearsal is responsibility in its purest form, the acceptance that the day is not something that happens to you, but something you help construct. By visualizing your actions in harmony with your values, you bring order to what would otherwise remain undefined. The Stoics knew that every day carries unpredictability, but they also knew that composure can be rehearsed. As you rehearse, feel gratitude for the chance to meet life consciously. You are not avoiding the unknown. You are preparing to greet it as an equal. Daniel Goleman reminds us that emotional intelligence begins with anticipation. To understand what might provoke you is to disarm it before it arrives. To visualize your ideal self is to begin becoming it. Each morning, then, becomes a simulation of virtue, a deliberate creation of mental stillness before the storm. You move through the day not surprised by hardship, but sculpted by it. You become the calm center in a world addicted to reaction. The day has not yet begun, yet already you have conquered it. The dopamine guard. Choose one hard thing first. Each morning, before the flood of impulses takes hold, the mind stands at a fragile crossroad. One path leads to comfort, to easy rewards that feel good now but drain strength later. The other leads to challenge, to friction, effort, resistance, and growth. The Stoics always chose the second path. They knew that comfort, unguarded, becomes corruption. That to protect the mind, you must discipline desire. The first act of the day, therefore, is sacred. It decides who rules, the will or the craving. Modern science now explains what the Stoics practiced instinctively. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation, is not the molecule of pleasure, but of pursuit. It surges not when we receive, but when we strive. Andrew Huberman calls it the currency of effort. When we seek constant stimulation, scrolling, consuming, checking, we burn this currency on trivial pursuits. The brain, addicted to instant gratification, loses the capacity for sustained focus. But when we direct dopamine towards something difficult, we reclaim it as an ally. It becomes the biochemical language of discipline. Marcus Aurelius began each morning by reminding himself that he would meet resistance, from people, from circumstance, from fatigue. Yet he faced it willingly, because he knew that adversity was not a hindrance to the path. It was the path itself. Modern psychology calls this the effort paradox. The harder the task, the deeper the satisfaction once it's done. The Stoic called it prohairesis, the conscious choice to do what is right, not what is easy. So when you rise, before the noise swallows your will, choose one thing that demands effort. One act that stretches the mind beyond inertia. It might be writing when inspiration is absent, exercising when comfort tempts you, studying when distraction seduces you. It is not the act itself that matters. It is what it represents. The victory of command over craving. Joe Dispenza would say you are teaching your body a new mind, rewiring the loop of dependency on external reward. Each morning you practice this, you weaken the chain of impulsive behavior and strengthen the circuitry of intention. The science of neuroplasticity shows that repeated challenge reshapes the brain. Each time you embrace effort voluntarily, the reward centers adapt. The brain begins to link satisfaction not to comfort, but to conquest. This is the essence of Stoicism. To find joy not in outcomes, but in integrity. To take pleasure not in indulgence, but in endurance. The same dopamine that once enslaved you to distraction becomes the messenger of mastery. Epictetus warned that every pleasure must first pass through the test of reason. Ask yourself, will this make me freer or weaker? The answer is always found in the direction of difficulty. Discomfort is not punishment, it is purification. It sharpens focus, strengthens willpower, and clears the fog of excess. When you choose one hard thing first, you recalibrate the entire day around effort, not avoidance. You anchor motivation to meaning, not to novelty. Jordan Peterson often says that responsibility gives life depth. The Stoics would agree. The harder the first act, the lighter the soul feels afterward. It is the paradox of all growth. That effort does not deplete energy. It generates it. Each morning becomes a declaration. I will not chase the easy. I will earn the essential. When you train your dopamine to rise from discipline, not distraction, you escape the tyranny of modern pleasure. You rediscover what it means to be alive on your own terms. Having earned momentum, you no longer chase, you lead. The quiet meal. Nourish without noise. In the rush of modern life, eating has become an act of distraction rather than awareness. People consume while scrolling, watching, talking, working, unaware of what enters their body, unaware of the miracle it represents. The Stoics would have seen this as one of the greatest losses of our age, not merely the loss of health, but the loss of reverence. Musonius Rufus, the philosopher often called the Roman Socrates, taught that eating is not just necessity, it is philosophy in motion. Moderation, presence, and gratitude must accompany each meal, for how we nourish ourselves reveals how we live. To the Stoics, food was training. It was an opportunity to practice self-control and gratitude simultaneously. They ate not to please the senses, but to sustain the body that serves the mind. Seneca wrote that pleasure is not in the banquet itself, but in the restraint to leave it. Modern neuroscience confirms that this restraint, the ability to delay gratification, strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the seat of discipline and foresight. Each act of conscious eating reshapes the neural patterns of consumption, turning instinct into intention. The morning meal, then, should not be a hurried ritual of hunger, but a moment of quiet communion between body and awareness. When you sit to eat, remove noise. No phone, no screen, no haste. The world can wait. Your mind cannot. As you take the first bite, observe its texture, its warmth, its scent. Feel how it becomes part of you, how nature, through 1,000 silent processes, has given this energy to sustain your existence. Gratitude, when practiced through eating, recalibrates dopamine and serotonin levels, grounding you in calm satisfaction rather than restless craving. Andrew Huberman explains that mindful eating regulates insulin, dopamine, and cortisol, creating the biochemical foundation for focus and stability throughout the day. To eat in silence is to honor the partnership between discipline and delight. It reminds you that pleasure, when approached with presence, no longer enslaves. It enriches. Each act of consumption becomes a lesson in temperance, the Stoic virtue of balance. You learn to stop when you are nourished, not when you are numb. You rediscover simplicity as strength. The Stoics believed that self-mastery begins not in moments of grandeur, but in the small, repetitive choices that reveal who commands the soul. Food is one of them. Joe Dispenza would say that eating consciously programs the body with a new emotional signature, a frequency of gratitude and coherence. You are teaching your physiology to respond to calm rather than chaos. Jordan Peterson would frame it as order within the smallest domain, transforming a mundane act into a sacred pattern of structure. Daniel Goleman would call it emotional regulation in its purest form, awareness guiding impulse. When you nourish yourself in quiet, the act transcends biology. It becomes meditation. You become aware of how energy moves through you, how nature provides, how your choices ripple beyond your plate into your mind. You realize that eating, when done consciously, is a practice of humility, a reminder that existence itself feeds you in ways beyond food. Each morning meal offers a choice: to consume unconsciously and continue the cycle of distraction, or to eat as a philosopher, aware, thankful, composed. The first fills the stomach, the second feeds the soul. Having fed the body with mindfulness, you feed the soul with discipline. The moment of direction. Decide the day before it decides you. Before stepping into the day, before the noise has the chance to shape your thoughts, there must be a moment of alignment, a deliberate act of decision. This is the moment of direction when you set your inner compass toward virtue before the world tempts you toward distraction. The Stoics believed that no day should begin by accident. Each dawn was a rehearsal for life itself, and life was nothing more than a series of mornings won or lost by attention. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "At daybreak, when you reluctantly arise, remember, it is your duty as a human being to do what nature requires." For him, the act of waking was not merely biological, it was moral. It was the renewal of purpose. To begin the day without direction, he believed, was to surrender reason to randomness. The Stoic rises with clarity because he understands that every action follows an initial orientation of the mind. Direction is destiny. In modern neuroscience, this moment is known as goal priming, the process of setting cognitive filters that determine what your brain will perceive as important throughout the day. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and self-control, responds powerfully to intention. When you begin your morning with conscious direction, you are literally programming your brain to seek alignment with your values. Andrew Huberman describes this as neurochemical anchoring, a single act of clarity that stabilizes dopamine and cortisol, making your focus resilient against distraction. Before you step into the current of the world, pause, take a breath, ask yourself one simple question. What kind of person do I intend to be today? Not what you hope will happen, not what others expect, but who you will choose to be when tested. Courageous, patient, disciplined, compassionate. Whatever virtue calls you most strongly, write it down, speak it aloud, feel it. The act of declaration transforms vague thought into tangible command. Cato the Younger, one of Rome's last true Stoics, lived this ritual each day. Surrounded by corruption, power, and chaos, he would begin his mornings in silence, reaffirming the principles that guided his life: justice, honesty, restraint. No matter what politics or fate threw at him, he moved through the day with unshakable coherence. He did not control the events around him, but he always controlled his direction within them. Joe Dispenza might describe this as an alignment of consciousness and energy. By choosing your state intentionally, you are no longer reacting to your environment. You are instructing it. You begin to operate from design rather than default. The nervous system, once a servant of stress, becomes a servant of purpose. Jordan Peterson calls this the ordering of the soul, the willingness to shoulder responsibility for one's trajectory rather than drift. Write one sentence every morning. It can be as simple as, "Today I will act with virtue, regardless of outcome." That single affirmation is both Stoic and scientific. It activates neural pathways associated with self-regulation and primes the mind to interpret challenges as opportunities for integrity. The brain follows the signals it receives most consistently. Repetition transforms intention into identity. To decide your day is not arrogance, it is authorship. You are no longer a passenger in the unfolding of events. You are the navigator. You will still meet resistance, still encounter the unforeseen, but these moments will no longer sway you, because the direction was chosen before the storm began. In this brief, deliberate pause before you face the world, you become what Marcus Aurelius called a mind disciplined by reason, a soul in harmony with nature. And when you walk out the door, you carry that harmony within you, silent, steady, luminous. And so, with calm fire, you enter the day. The empire. Within a Stoic morning is not a checklist. It is a ceremony of remembrance, a quiet return to the essence of who you are beneath the noise, the routine, and the roles the world asks you to play. Each habit, each breath, each conscious act from the moment you wake is a brick laid in the architecture of your inner empire. And this empire is not built upon conquest of others, but mastery of self. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the largest empires in history, yet he spent his mornings writing reminders to remain humble, calm, and kind. Because he understood what few ever do, the world outside can only be governed by the world within. The true empire is internal, an empire of composure, reason, and virtue. The Stoic rises each day not to dominate, but to align, not to accumulate, but to awaken. As dawn stretches across the sky, your body and mind engage in their ancient conversation. Dopamine and cortisol rise to sharpen focus, neurons begin firing with renewed rhythm, and the prefrontal cortex awaits instruction. Science and philosophy meet in this moment. Your biology prepares for purpose, but purpose must be chosen. The way you breathe, think, move, and focus in these first minutes rewrites the language of your brain. The Stoics intuited what neuroscience now confirms. Habits of presence alter the structure of consciousness itself. To live as a Stoic in the modern age is not to escape emotion. It is to refine it. It is to train the nervous system to serve reason, not impulse. To act according to principles, not moods. The more you practice this, the more your neurochemistry harmonizes with your philosophy. Gratitude strengthens serotonin. Discipline stabilizes dopamine. Reflection calms the amygdala. In this harmony, apatheia, freedom from destructive passions, becomes not a distant ideal, but a measurable state of balance. Each morning, when you rise before the world, breathe with awareness, face discomfort, write your thoughts, stand with dignity, give thanks, rehearse virtue, choose effort, eat in silence, and set direction. You are not merely starting your day, you are sculpting your destiny. You are training your biology to obey your philosophy. The Stoics called this oikeiosis, the process of becoming at home with yourself and the universe. To live as part of the cosmic order rather than in resistance to it. Joe Dispenza might say you are collapsing old neural patterns and broadcasting a new frequency of coherence. The Stoics would say you are practicing reason aligned with nature. The language differs, but the truth remains one. Transformation begins in silence and is sustained by consistency. The world belongs to the one who can remain still in its storms. So as you step into the light of a new day, remember this. Discipline was never the opposite of freedom. It is freedom. For only the disciplined mind can choose its response, shape its perception, and live without being enslaved by circumstance. Freedom is not found in the absence of limits, but in the mastery of them. And when the noise of the world rises again, return to that morning stillness. Return to the breath, the calm, the center. There you will find the empire that no fortune can give and no loss can destroy. The empire within. Strength in stillness, power in discipline, wisdom in action.